plants are being increasingly recognized for their contribution to people, our well-being. However, most attention has been given to other plants, like, for example, the trees and their ecosystem services, like carbon sequestration, to mitigate climate change, but also pollination with respect to the production of vegetables and fruits. But what about seeds? The same product of pollination. So in this talk, I'm going to talk to you about the natural capital value of seeds beyond its economic value. And I'm going to explore with you the importance of seeds, not only the biodiversity loss, but also the role that they have as assets for nature-based solutions to tackle some of the global challenges we are facing today, like food insecurity, climate change, poverty, and also deforestation. So my name is Dr. Tiziana Ulian, and I'm a scientist, and I've been working for over 20 years on projects to conserve plant diversity with a focus on seeds. And seeds to help support the local livelihoods of communities across Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. And this is where I work. This building hosts the Millennium Seed Bank, which is located at Wakehurst in the southeast of England. And here we also are working with a lot of collaborators around the world. In fact, this is the hub of the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, that works with collaborators and scientists to collect seeds and conserve them. And she's Frances, my colleague, inside the vault of the Millennium Seed Bank, while she's storing one of our precious seed collections. And here we are conserving 2.4 billion seeds that they come from over 40,000 plant species. And these seeds have been collecting from all around the world, from more than 100 countries, together with other scientists. And the seeds, before being stored, they're dried to low humidity levels, like at desert conditions. And after that, they're packaged and then stored at -20. And this is the way to conserve plant species long-term, from hundreds of years. So let's now move into my world. And in this picture, you see a mix of fruits and seeds, some of which might be familiar to you. And some of the seeds come inside some dry fruit, like in the case of beans, and some other, they come inside some fleshy fruits, like in the case of the passion fruit, or for example, apple. And this is really linked to the way the seeds disperse in nature. In fact, some seeds, they just fall directly from the dry fruit, like in the case of the poppy seeds, and in other cases, they fall together with the fruit, like, for example, berries. And that's how berries, they're eaten by birds or other animals, and this is the way also how they are dispersed. And these are seeds under the microscope. So you can see how beautiful they are, and scientifically, they are a prime example of where forms and function meet. And they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And the smallest seeds are the one of the orchids. In fact, orchids like this one produce seeds that are less than 1 millimeter long. And have you ever treated yourself to some good quality vanilla ice cream? You might have seen some very tiny black dots on the vanilla ice cream. And these are actually vanilla seeds. And these vanilla seeds come from the vanilla orchid. And the flavor comes from the fermentation of the pods, of the fruits, the two sticks in this image. So now let's see at the other side spectrum. And this is the Seychelles coconut, or double coconut. And you can see it's huge, okay? And it can weigh up to 20 kilograms. and somehow resemble some human shape. As my former colleague, the seed morphologist, Dr. Wolfgang Stappi, once wrote, the sailors in the Middle Age, when they saw these giant seeds floating in the Indian Ocean, might have had all sorts of silly ideas. So, let's see what is a seed and why it's important to conserve so many of them. So for this, I'm going to talk you through our publication that I produced together with my colleague, Dr. Efisio Mattana and Professor Hugh Pritchard last year. And this is about the natural capital of seeds and looking at the value of seeds using an economic framework, looking both at the monetary and non-monetary benefits derived from the use of seeds. And in this picture, you can see the 4 categories we divide the natural value, capital value of seeds. So we have the existence value, the direct use value, the indirect use value, and the potential value. So now through the talk, let's look one by one to all these values. So let's start with the existence value. The existence value is really related to the value that is given to natural resources, but the fact they just exist, whether we use them or we don't use them. So seeds are the product of the sexual reproduction of plants, okay? And they're like vessels traveling through space from one area to another, and through time, in fact, they go from one generation to the next generation. And each seed contains both nutritional material and genetic information that allow the seeds to germinate and at the same time to interact with the natural environment. And so that's why seeds are very important for plants, and that's why also we conserve them in the seed bank where I work. In fact, seed banks, like the one where I work, allows to conserve the plant diversity in the form of seeds. And we can do this in a small space for a long time and at low cost. And that's why seed banks are so important to conserve this plant diversity. Let's now move to the second of our category, the direct use value. That is the use of the seeds directly. So basically, by consumption or production of the seeds. And some of us might have an idea of the importance of seeds in this sense because of economic value in the seed sales. For example, the estimate seed sales is about $30 billion US. But seeds are much more than this. And actually, seeds are very important for our diet. And do you know that most of our plant-based calories come just from 3 crops? And these are the ones on the screen. So these are wheat, corn, and rice. And these are seeds. So from here, you can understand how seeds are very much related to our life. And also, you might not be surprised that our entire civilization was based on seeds. And the capacity to store the seeds in seed banks allow, or at the local level, allow the development of agriculture around 12,000 years ago. But normally we know more about the value of the main crops, like the one that we saw earlier. But what about minor crops? All these seeds are very important at the local level. For example, have you ever heard about fonio? Fonio is from West Africa, and has been cultivated for over 5,000 years. And it feeds millions of people. And is also a species that grows fast and under very dry conditions. So it really can become a future crop. And I'm not saying that we should all starting to cultivate fonio everywhere, but definitely it can be commercialized, like, for example, rice or quinoa more recently. And fonio is also important from a cultural point of view. In fact, the people from the Dogon County in Mali, They believed that the entire universe was born out of a single grain of seeds. Isn't this beautiful? And also that's why they call it the seeds of the universe. And here you can see a traditional recipe that was prepared by the famous chef Senegalese Pierre Thiam, that he started to promote dishes with fonio in the US, where it's based now. And because it's gluten-free and also it's rich in vitamins and minerals, it can also become important for our diet, not only the diet in West Africa. And here it's a more modern way of eating fonio, like a substitute to cereal for breakfast. For example, like this with yogurt or like in the desserts. So our third category is the indirect use value. And again, there are plenty of examples around us about the indirect use of seeds through the products derived from seeds. For example, like flour or fibers or oils, they all come from seeds. And who's wearing cotton today? Probably some of us, yes? Okay, so cotton actually comes from the cotton seeds. And it's the same material that protects the seeds of the cotton that we actually use it to protect ourselves. And this same material is processed and made into the cotton fabric. Argan oil, I'm sure a lot of you have heard or come across argan oil in a lot of care products. But the argan oil that comes also from the seeds of the argan tree that comes from Morocco, is native of Morocco. And it's also used to dip bread in for breakfast, for example, or to sparkle it on couscous. And goats love it too. In fact, they climb up the argan trees and they feed on the pulpy fruit, and also on the leaves of this tree. Another example, the morama bean. This is one of our heroes that it grows in the harsh conditions of the Kalahari Desert in Southern Africa. And these are our heroes because as a lot of examples of direct and indirect use. So the large bean is eaten, roasted like cashew nuts, and also it's used as a meat substitute. But the same bean that we can see here also can yield oil, milk, butter, and flour. It can be so to make biscuits. And that's why this species has been selected in one of our projects by the local communities in Botswana in order to bring it into cultivation. In fact, this species is still wild harvested, so it's still taken from the wild. And the community we're working with wanted us not only to conserve the seeds for the future generation, but to help them through germination study to cultivate the species in the future. And then let's move to our fourth category, the potential value of seeds. In fact, all these examples that we have seen so far of direct and indirect use, they're only the tip of the icebergs. In fact, there are many seeds out there and plants that we don't know the use of. And that's why it's important, like in seed bank, not only to conserve the seeds, but also to study them. And in this way, to unlock all that properties and to study all these seed traits that could be useful for the production, for example, of new material or for new technological processes. Here you have some example like of seeds, like for food, for medicine, and so on. But also they are a source of genes that they can help to improve our major crops to be resilient, more resilient in future climatic changes. But there is one activity that is able to capture all the uses that I share with you so far. And this is ecological restoration. And seeds are like the assets of ecological restoration. And not only we need a sufficient amount of seeds to have a successful restoration, but we need them with a high quality and also of species to plant the right species in the right place. Like, for example, in this picture, we can see Lucero, that she's the seed nursery manager at Veracruz in Mexico, where we were working with our collaborator. And also, it's not sufficient to have this amount of seeds of good quality, but also we need to have a deep understanding of the seeds itself, and also their relationship with nature, the people around them, but also the local economy, and also agriculture innovation. This concept, this holistic approach, is at the heart of our program in Mexico, where we are working together with local communities to select species that are important to them, like, for example, for food, or for medicine, or for material. But at the same time, we are looking for species that they have a high capacity to store carbon, to mitigate climate change. And also species that they can germinate under higher temperatures in the future, or more drought. And in this program, we are collecting seeds, we process them, we germinate them in the nursery, in the local nursery, tree nursery, and after 1 year, they're ready to be planted in reforestation program. And this is what we are aiming for, a full ecosystem, a full forest, where we restore all its natural capital and all its function. So let's dream about it. Let's breathe. I hope that I've managed to convince you by now of the values and the importance of seeds, and how seeds are important to conserve plant diversity, but also to help tackling some of the global challenges we're facing today. And I want to leave you with this last thought. Where there are seeds, there is hope. Thank you very much.